Hello and welcome to the Odcast, the IKP podcast, which brings you behind the scenes of a national touring theatre company. I'm Ollie, the host this week, and each week we're joined by a selection of IKP members and theatre professionals. Joining me today are Nate, Joe, and Kirsten. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you all today?
Doing all right.
Yeah, all good.
Lovely stuff. And you, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm great.
Brilliant.
How are you, Ollie?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm a bit knackered actually from drama school training today. No.
Humble brag.
What?
Bit of soul flex, but yeah, no, I'm pretty good. Yeah, just really tired. I've had a load of movement, so like this was Monday. We had movement on Monday, and my legs still haven't recovered. So I need to get back on that fitness grind. How is everyone else's day?
Just been at
What have we all
work all
done?
day. It's been fun. Passed an assessment. That's all. That's kind of happened with my day. It's really not that exciting.
Woo!
Woo!
Joe, how was your day?
Yeah, it was alright, thank you. I did some filming. I sorted some stuff out ready for announcing Treasure Island and Beauty and the Beast being on sale. And I've started booking venues for the Christmas Panto as well, which is fun.
Oh, what's the Christmas
lovely.
panto?
We're doing Sleeping Beauty this Christmas.
Oh my god.
Which will be fun.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Oh my god, buzzing.
And finally, Nathan, what did you do today?
I did day 4 of my rehearsals for my first third year show, and we rehearsed like a really crap flash mob proposal. And yeah, the whole thing seems really sick. The director's amazing. Like the whole rehearsal process so far has been really nice. So yeah, it's just nice being back in a room, and we kind of had a check-in, and we spoke to each other, and we were like, I hadn't anticipated how much we would have missed this. We're just doing it and just really savouring everything we're doing, because we took it for granted to begin with. So I don't know, it's just nice to be back in the room and doing stuff and giving birth to footballs.
Sorry, what?
You lost me at the end there.
Just stupid clown games and stuff. Just doing the most ridiculous stuff and being I can't believe this is our degree. I can't believe this is what we're paying $9,000 for. And actually getting a piece of paper at the end of it.
What do you mean by clown games?
Someone would do something, and then the rest of the people in the room would be yeah, if they wanted them to do it, or no, if they wanted them to do something else. Out of that, just trying to find stuff that's funny, and finding the fun little games in stuff, and being yeah, that's a great contraction of that football you've it's ridiculous. And it's really funny watching the stage manager sat in the corner watching us I can't believe this is what you guys have been doing for 2 years.
Put you on the spot though, I think.
Definitely.
It's
horrible.
Yeah, I love improvisation. I think it's sick. I think it's so much fun, and I think a lot of really fun theatre comes out of it. So yeah.
I think it's it's so useful to be able to do as well, because every time you fuck up on stage, you're just gonna need it, because otherwise you just corpse, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, we've all been there.
I mean, most of Joe's shows are pretty much improv anyway, so.
I wish everyone could see Joe's face right now.
Well, actually, that leads me on very nicely. So today, just to help people get a better idea of IKP and who we are as a company, we're going to look at IKP's quote-unquote bunny ears style. And, just...
I didn't know we had a bunny ears style.
A bunny ears style? No, I'm doing the... People people can't see it, obviously, but I'm doing the thing where you bunny ears with your fingers. Because we don't we don't have a signature style. I think that sounds a bit pretentious, but we're not the new practitioners, or I don't know.
I don't know. I think I think everyone has a style. Do you know what I mean? Like, not in a wanky way. I just think, like, if you get 4 people in a room reading stuff, each person's gonna have their own vibe, and that coming together means when you could, I don't know, play like with a skipping rope or something, and the way that those 4 people do it in a room is gonna be unique. Like, I think, like, it's not about like being a practitioner or like paving the new way to make theatre. It's just like, well, if you're in a room doing stuff and you're new people to doing that, then you're gonna have your own new style.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like certain types of people coming together create new styles. Like you just said, I think IKP, that like the people that work for IKP all follow a similar kind of style, I think. And it's what, like, you're always saying though, Joe, aren't you, that you enjoy how fun it is to be in a room. And why don't you tell us more about that, Joe?
Yeah, I was sort of discussing this with one of my friends earlier today. I was discussing with Caro the fact that IKP has created sort of a rep theatre vibe, in that we have a family of actors who come together to create shows and kind of build the shows together, and then that pool of actors will move on, and some of them will do other shows and some of them will go on to the next IKP show. And I think it's really important to get the right, like Nathan said, everybody brings their own vibe to the room, and it's making sure that everybody that comes into the room brings a vibe that kind of gels with everybody else's vibe. That was the most wanky sentence I think I've ever said in my entire life. It's about bringing attitudes into the room that blend well together, and finding people that lift each other up on stage.
Yeah, and I think like with IKP, the main vibes in a rehearsal room seem to just be, you know, like people are having fun, and they're like very clearly like passionate about what they're doing because they're enjoying it at the same time. It doesn't seem laid back, because at the end of the day, like, the rehearsal rooms are professional and the show gets done, but like everybody just has a good time. Like, there's no need to, you know, like, have to like study the characters intently and stuff, because it wouldn't work for like your type of shows.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think studying the characters too intensely when you're doing something that multi-rolls as quickly as the shows that we do is detrimental really to what you're doing, because nobody needs to know about this backstory that's not in the show. What those characters are there for are to make people laugh. And the second you start trying to analyse them too much, they kind of become a bit, I don't know, they become a bit too real, and then you can't laugh at them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's nice kind of playing together and having fun. But there's no way you could say that Greg's rehearsal room is intense, because we get to the end of every day and it's like, I'm gonna go sleep now, because you are just exhausted in such a good way. It's like, it's exciting and it's exhilarating, but it's exhausting.
Yeah, what I really like about like Greg being the director and just Greg's energy, I don't know, he just seems to keep it at 100% throughout the entire day. Like, you wouldn't even realise that it's gone from 10 a.m. until like, I don't know, 5, 6 p.m. because he just keeps it up. Obviously we notice it, like, we're dying, but Greg he runs around the room like he's 12 years old. It's insane. It's literally insane.
Yeah. I think IKP style is really important. Like, don't get me wrong, I do think that like analyzing your character's backstory and, you know, like creating circumstances for them, previous circumstances, is important for a particular style of theatre. You know, like, I think like it's important if you want like dramas, or, you know, like looking at real characters. Whereas I think, Joe, your characters are more like, I don't know, what would you call them? Like a caricature?
I don't know that they're caricatures, but they're.
Well,
I think
no.
once you create a real person, it's really hard to enable the audience to laugh at them. You have to then allow the audience in and let them laugh with them. Whereas if you make them kind of, kind of just tools for the comedy, rather than making them kind of need to be serious, grounded characters, then it enables the audience to get behind the comedy of the show, rather than needing to feel that the motivation of every character to say every line is necessarily understandable and perfect.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because like if you look at your characters like Dorothy, for instance, or is it D'Artagnan from little shout out, like you do care about them, like in a way that like they do feel human still.
Yeah, as I said it, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to pick out those characters, and I think it's an important thing that kind of about. It's sort of about understanding what the purpose of the story is, and which characters you're encouraged to laugh at. And that was sort of part of my reason that we didn't gender swap any of the kind of friends of Dorothy in Wizard of Oz this year, because the kind of the for me, there's a really good story there that Dorothy, as this young woman, is able to help each of these characters by helping them find something that they didn't have in them already. And each of those characters in the books particularly is like they are kind of they're written quite stupid. They are unable to see things that are clearly obvious to other people. And I think you start getting into kind of it's an awkward thing to say, but you get into kind of the gender politics, where if you've got Dorothy coming and the three stupid, laughable characters are all men, you've got kind of an opportunity for a strong, uplifting lead female role, and you have the opportunity to create a role model for young women where there's not ever a point where they're told that she is less than any of the other characters. It's an opportunity for there to be this strong female character that all of the men depend upon to be their strongest, which is an inversion of the way a lot of books were written back when that was written anyway.
I mean, like, also, the fact that you base these shows on books, I think, really helps with fleshing out your characters anyway, because these are characters that people already know and love, and so you could really argue that your shows are like more parodies of those stories. So like people know the story of the Wizard of Oz or the Three Musketeers. Well, they think they do going into the show. I say that because like I realized I didn't know anything about either, but you go into the show thinking, oh, I know all these characters, and so it gives you, your shows give you like a different side to them instead. So you like, yeah, it's interesting. I wonder what would happen if like in the future when you decide to write your own shows without adapting from a book, whether you'd be able to use the same IKP style in that way, because you can't rely on people knowing these characters. They have to you have to go in with a fresh start with them.
I think the thing is as well is like obviously because Joe works off of like original stories which aren't typically what everyone knows. For example, like going back to like The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, like even the slippers, like people typically know Dorothy's slippers as being red, but in the book they're silver, and there's lots of little different changes in that, and there's things that people don't necessarily recognise, and I think the things that people do recognise are what's important, like not massively important. I think we still have a lot to kind of develop and grow on as a company in terms of diversity and stuff like that. I think there's still so much room for that. Like
it would work with stories that are new to people, because people come to see The Wizard of Oz, they're like, oh yeah, The Wizard of Oz, we like that. But when you do the show, you don't start with everyone knowing the story of The Wizard of Oz. You have to start from the beginning. You have to go all the way through, and what I think we do really well, to be honest, is we build a world. It's not about like the backstories of characters and stuff. It's create a world, and then people live within that world, and the protagonist takes the audience on a journey through the world. I think that's
Yeah.
what we do really well. So if it's an original story, you still get that as an audience member. Like, I think the reason that Dorothy or D'Artagnan are so like oh god, what's the word, like relatable, is because protagonists usually are. They're the closest character to the audience. Like, I'm going to go back into Resident Evil, but like in Resident Evil 7, they created a character that's first person that has not much personality so that the audience can connect, like feel like they're the person that's going through the world. And I think like most protagonists, especially in classic books, are similar. They just react to things. They're like, oh, this is happening and this is happening. So the audience gets that. And I think like while we're not like, oh, this is what the character is, this is like they had toast for breakfast and they have slept 3 hours in the last 2 days. What we do is like the Guardian and the Clerk were both from the same world. They were both from the city of Oz. So Murray did something in the rehearsal, and I went, well, if I'm from the same place, I'll do something similar. I started doing something, and he went, well, I don't think mine's matching up with yours. So then he started doing something. We did something similar. We had different characters, but they had the same vibe, so that the audience could look at those characters and have something very specific happening and going, well, they're both in the same place. And like the Munchkins, although they were all like crazy characters, because they were puppets, they all fit within the same part of the world. And I think like you don't need a story that people know to get that joy. I think as long as you have those little pockets within the world that feel real and tangible, you can bring people along for a story and they'll love it.
Well, and I think on
Yeah.
top of that, it's amazing how much it's amazing how many people think they know a story, and then the story that they know isn't actually quite the story. It's one of the best things is when people come up at the end and they're like, "You were really true to the book with that," and I'm like, "No, we changed a lot." But it's if you create the world that they recognise and you give them the characters that they recognise, people are happy with the story that's presented to them as long as it's done with it in an interesting way. And kind of people pick and choose the stuff that stays with them and the stuff that they remember. And that's sort of the memory that people have of stories. So it's got a kind of you're right, Nate. It's about creating that world and letting the audience sit in it, and then they feel like they're part of it. But I think with all of our shows, it's sort of what you say, all about taking classic stories, and it's like it's almost like giving them a refresh. It's like redoing that story, but for 100 years later, or however much later it is since it was written, because there are some things that are out of time, and some things like Dorothy, for example, in The Wizard of Oz, like she is the protagonist of the story. It does follow her, but everything sort of happens to her in the story. She doesn't have a huge amount of control over what's going on. It's very much walk this road, meet these people, and they'll accompany you, and you'll get to the wizard and he'll send you to do something. And it's finding the opportunities to kind of strengthen those characters who previously wouldn't have had a voice.
But yeah, I think that's something that's really important to do, though, is just to go through those olden stories and like update them a bit. I think it's nice for kids to get a newer version of a classic story, because they get to share, they get to share that thing that the parents get to show the kids that something that they grew up with, and then the kids get to see that same thing, but also it's more modernized to give them a better perception of the world that they live in. Like you say, like Dorothy in your script was a much more headstrong and independent person who controlled things that happened around her rather than things happening to her. And I think that's so important for children these days to grow up in, especially little girls, because it shows that they do have a say in things, and they do have a place in this world, and that there are strong female role models that they can look up to, like Dorothy. And I think it's really cool that IKP can give that, and you get the mix of both worlds, really, because parents are satisfied because they get to share that experience with their child, and the child is still able to share that, but get a more modern view on it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do, and
Absolutely, yeah.
I think one of the things that's weirdly started happening is that the IKP shows tackle some quite difficult things, but they tackle them in accessible, comfortable ways. So, like Dorothy's speech at the end of Wizard of Oz, she had a long speech about loss, and about missing people and about people not being there anymore, and that's like that slightly came from kind of my own experience of kind of having to help young people through a situation where they're dealing with grief and loss and separation, because it was part of this world that everybody felt comfortable in, it gave an opportunity for young kids to hear Dorothy talking about how kind of things live on inside your heart, and how just because you're not somewhere doesn't mean that your home isn't still there anymore, and all of those things. And it makes those difficult conversations quite accessible for everybody in the family, and I think hopefully gives parents something they can use as a callback if they have to deal with that situation, particularly with younger kids, that they can kind of go, actually, do you remember that time in that show once?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Like,
you're a parent. Have you ever used it? Have you ever like shown like, because your kids come and see your show? Do they like? Have you ever used a message from your show for your kids?
It's normally in the reverse. It's normally that I write something into the show because I need to say it to my kids, and it's much easier to do it through somebody else playing the character than it is to do it as the parent. Because when you're the parent, the kid's like, "Oh, I don't want to listen. I'm not listening to you." But you sit the kids down in front of a story and get Dorothy to say it, and they're there lapping it up, which is great.
I think it's also like a retrospective thing as well, because when I first got that monologue, I didn't quite get it and I struggled with it. But when I did get it, and when I did have kind of like my moments with it, if you will, if I did take my time with it and all of that, I realised that I also really relate to it. As someone the topics that you spoke about, like grief, like separation, all of that, like I think that really applies to it. And as someone who's moved around a lot and had very kind of different households and all of that kind of thing, it does really go to show that like home is where you make it, and it's where the people are right, and it's where the love is, quite frankly. And you don't need to have that just with family. I have it with friends. I have it with friends all across the globe, and I'm so lucky to have that. And it just goes to show that it's not just blood, like, not to be really sappy, but it's not just blood. Like, you can have incredible relationships with people who you're not just blood related to. And it took, like me, like even playing the character and doing that monologue, like I didn't get it at the beginning. I remember reading it and literally saying in the rehearsal room, "Oh, I don't get it. I don't get it." And then I did it, and I had like a one-on-one kind of direction with Greg, the director, and I was like, I do get it. Like, I get it. I don't know. It's really sappy. I feel a bit emotional actually. It's a bit sappy,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's true. Like, I don't know. I think it's really important. I think it's really important for like kids, teenagers, adults, whoever. I think it's really important to hear sometimes. And sometimes, like, I'm rambling on at this point, but there are other plays and stuff where sometimes you hear things and it doesn't click until a few months later what it actually meant, until you're in like a situation where it really means something. And I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, just put my 2 pence in.
That's what a podcast's for, right?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, no, and I think theatre's such a good way of like educating people on these issues, especially when you have got like I personally, like, I really enjoy theatre that uses humans like in a like almost in like a naturalistic setting or something, but it educates people on like political matters subtly, and I think that's such a good way of doing things. I was saying to Kirsten before we started the podcast, I just read a play called Deposit, and it's like on the surface level it seems like a pretty like basic comedy. So there's four people they're two couples and they move into a flat in London, and it's a one bedroom flat. So one couple live in the bedroom and the other live in the living room, and they're saving up trying to get money so that they can eventually buy their own houses. And it's just about like the antics of what goes on in between the two couples that they don't get on, and it is a comedy, but then like you look at like the deeper levels, and especially towards the climax as well, it starts to reveal itself a bit more. I won't spoil it obviously because people should read it. I'll look up the author in a bit because it has just slipped my head, and I'm really sorry to the author of Deposit for that. Um, but yeah, it subtly highlights the problems that we have in the society at the moment. In that, my generation and the generation above, we're considered generation rent because people below the age of 30 are unable to buy a house because of how expensive it is. It's a real shame, and it's about like how expensive London is and how hard it is to buy your own place, and about the importance that society puts on making money and how that is directly related to succeeding. But it does it in a comedic way, and it's not being forced down your throat. Like you're being educated in a subliminal way almost, and I think that's such a good way of doing things because, well, like linking back to psychology as well. Like the minute you accuse someone of being wrong, again, I can't remember the name of the psychologist who this is. We'll get there.
So well cited.
Thank you. Yeah. Citation Ollie's brain. But in psychology, they say that if you're trying to change someone's opinion, you shouldn't like directly accuse them of being wrong, because that immediately brings their defenses up, and they like nobody wants to be accused of being wrong. Like you can't change someone's mind that way because they get defensive and they won't look at it properly. Whereas if you try to, like if you're flexible with it and you try to educate them in a different way, like if you give your opinion, but you're not like saying you're wrong for doing this, it changes their mind a lot easy. It makes it a lot easier. And so personally, I think that's, again, sorry I'm rambling, but I think that kind of theatre is really important for social change. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think about your how you prefer your style of theatre.
No, I get you. I
the
think
person who wrote Deposit.
I get you. I think the way that the character of like the Scarecrow was in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was a good example of that, of like just this silly kind of, maybe people could perceive it a certain way, like maybe it was written just to be funny, like we don't know. I think there were elements of it that people could have taken from it, but it was still funny and you could apply it to your own political standpoint wherever you are in the world. Yeah, I don't know. I like silliness. I like silliness, and I don't know. I like silliness in theatre. That's it. It's like yeah. I don't know.
And I think like what you were saying about like you can't say to someone you're wrong because they'll just shut down. Like I mean, not to blow my own trumpet, but like I think I did that quite nicely with Scarecrow. As I was like, well, he's clever. He's had intelligence the whole way through, and that's the point. Is he gets to the end and he finds out he was clever enough all along. And I was like, well, I want a West Country accent, because when do you see a clever character portrayed in film, TV, or theatre as clever? Like, you never hear that accent associated with intelligence, and I think, like, just that little nudge, just that little, like, this character's intelligent and charming and also has this voice that is unrelated to his intellect. I don't know, it was funny because Greg was like, that's an interesting thing, because actually, like, that means that. And, like, that was, like, week 2 of the rehearsal process, and I was like, yeah, I know, Greg. But I think, like, people do take on those little nudges in a way that's more constructive, usually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means that, they acknowledge that is there, and that they've seen a character that has done that. But it happens without like it happens below the surface level. So they won't like actively go home and go, oh well, the Scarecrow had like a southern accent, um but he was intelligent. Like I don't understand that. Oh, that's social change. Blah blah blah. It will just change their perception of it, so that later on it just happens organically.
Yeah. And I think like you can't underestimate the power of people laughing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it's really easy to be like, here's an issue that needs addressing, so here's all the heavy stuff about the issue. And like I think you need that for some shows. Like I think that has its place, but I also think like getting people to laugh in the first 5 minutes of a show, getting them on side, making them like you, makes them more agreeable, makes them go like, oh, actually, I like you, so what do you have to say? And I'll listen. And then you can put that nudge. I think like there's definitely things where you have to make people uncomfortable to see uncomfortable truths. I think like, I May Destroy You is a good example of that. But I think also being like, we're friends. We like you and you like us. Now stop treating people badly.
What is I May Destroy You? Sorry.
It's a TV show written and I can't remember if it's written and starring or like written and directed by Michaela Cole, who also wrote Chewing Gum. Yeah. And it's just like, it's really, really popular, and it started a massive conversation about like sexual assault because that's what it talks about in the show. And like, it's brilliant at what it does. Like, I think it's really powerful to have those things that expose uncomfortable truths and start those conversations. And then having that in tangent to stuff that makes people laugh and then like nudges them in the right direction. Like everything like that working together pushes people in the right place.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I just looked up the deposit writer. It's Matt Hartley is the writer. So sorry, Matt, for forgetting your name. It's a great play. But yeah, Joe. So like, why do you like your specific style of theatre? Like, why did you take IKP in that direction? Like, why not write like heavy dramas or something like that?
Honestly, because I like having a laugh, and it makes me laugh. And I started it off kind of on top of a full-time job, so it was my downtime, and I didn't want to go from a full-time job into doing this heavy show because like heavy shows have got merit. They've like, for people who like them, you can't beat a heavy show. Some of the heavier shows are some of my favourite shows, but they're not what I want to do with my free time, and they're not what I want to write, and I don't think they're what I write naturally. Right. I think it takes me a lot more brain power to write a serious show than it takes me to write a silly show, and I'd much rather muck about. But at the same time, I always doubt that. We covered this in the first podcast, that like I always doubt whether my stuff is funny. Because it's all just a bit nuts. It's all kind of, it's a bit kind of bonkers comedy, or delightfully daft if you read the stage. But
was that before or after the 4 stars?
Well, same piece. But so yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason, and again we've discussed this, so that I know the cast hate it. It's part of the reason that I don't let them see the script before the first read through, because I need to gauge the reaction of the company when they do the first read through, and if people have already read a script, they come to it knowing the jokes, particularly actors, because they all want to perform as perfectly as they can the first time you do a read through. So so they all read the script and then they turn up and they don't laugh at any of the jokes, and I sit there going, nobody's going to laugh at these jokes because the actors didn't find it funny. And my favourite thing about a read through is reading through it and the actors struggling to say their own lines because they're laughing at stuff. There was one line which weirdly barely got a laugh during the actual show for Wizard of Oz that Murray said, and then he giggled for the next 2 pages in the read through. And I was like, okay, that one's sent in. I enjoy that one. But yeah, the audience just didn't want that joke. But Murray liked it, so I was happy with it.
I'm sorry, I'm
okay.
also going so off topic because I'm like, oh my god, it's so crazy. Like when I joined IKP, when we did Sword in the Stone, we were like proper like professional in the rehearsal space, sitting at a table reading it like all together. Like obviously we read it all together anyway, but like we read it all together on this one little table with like our little cups with juice and coffee and tea. And then the next year it's COVID and we're like socially distanced.
In my back garden.
Yeah,
In your
sat
back
in the
garden.
freezing cold, like wrapped up with
Shivering,
blankets,
with someone handing out handmade, fucking Chaz handing out handmade face masks. Like, it's just a parallel universe, isn't it? It's crazy, but it's so relevant. So, Ollie, what were you gonna say?
Right. So, Joe, does that mean that like heavy dramas are like ruled out in the future of IKP?
No, IKP at some point will move into heavy dramas. There are a couple of slightly more grown up, slightly more serious scripts in the making, but they are taking a lot longer than.
Yeah.
It's not hard for them to take longer than the comedy scripts. You kind of just fall out. But the
No, they
serious
don't. You spend
ones.
a lot of time.
Sorry?
So no, they don't. You spend a lot of time and effort on them.
We do spend a lot of time and effort on them. The comedy scripts get written in my head over a number of months, and then because I know what's happening, it's easier to kind of sit down and bash them out. Whereas the serious ones, I sort of have to do on paper because otherwise I'm carrying around these really kind of serious, heavy shows. And I spend all of my time writing serious shows, having to fight the urge to put something bonkers and silly in it. There are moments of comedy. You can't have an hour and a half's worth of theatre where nobody does anything even vaguely pleasant, because you have to have the rise and fall. It's the way that life works. There's highs and there's lows, and you have to take one with the other. And it's the same with doing a comedy. It's the same as like with Wizard of Oz. Like we discussed that discussion that monologue that Kirsten had as Dorothy about loss and about home and about separation and all of that is bundled inside of this really silly show. But you have to have the highs so that those lows are poignant and so that they mean something. And it's the same with a serious show. That you have to have the ups so that you can have the downs, because if you just have the downs all the way through, you're just going to hate it. I mean, even in something as miserable as Les Mis, which is hugely depressing, you then have the Thénardiers thrown in so that you get the uplift every time something serious is about to happen. If we ignore Thénardier singing Dog Eat Dog about picking the gold off corpses, all of their other songs, like you have Master of the House straight after Fantine has died, just before Cosette gets bought and we get the time jump because of the whole fight between Javert and Jean Valjean. You've got that up because Fantine has just died, and then you also get Beggar at the Feast at the wedding at the end. So you've had the whole barricade thing where basically the entire younger part of the cast have died. Spoilers, sorry. And then you get the wedding, you get Beggars at the Feast, which is another uplift. It's a little fun bit just before anybody that didn't previously die in the show dies later. So it's finding those balances, I think.
How do you think that's grown from the beginning? Like, obviously, the company's been going for how many years now?
This is our 6th year.
6th year. So I assume it's obviously not been, I mean, assumptions, but like, okay, so comparing your first year to the most like recent show, I guess, or the most recent year of shows or whatever, like what would you say has been the biggest development within that time?
I think the biggest development has been I think it's been the writing, in that they're written so that they're a bit more fluid. I think the first year, I mean, let's be honest, the first year was a parody of Enid Blyton, and the first version of the script was so horrendously crude. Like, it was just the most vile. Like, it was almost like softcore porn version of Enid Blyton. Just every rude joke that could be in there was in there. I mean, she made it easy by writing in characters called Dick and Fanny, but whatever. But yeah, it's so the first year was, I think there was a lot less heart in them. The first few years, I think there was a lot of storytelling and a lot of plot progression going on, and I don't think there was as much feeling. I don't think there was as much heart, and I don't think there was as much. I don't think there was as much of a kind of message in them. There wasn't a message in them really. I think Three Musketeers was the first year that we sort of did a show that meant something and said something other than making people laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing though, that we do have those kind of messages that are put into it, because I think it improves the comedy as well in a way, like, because it gives it more of a substance. Like with your earlier shows, I didn't get to see them unfortunately, but like if you just have like straight comedy with like no message behind it, it becomes almost kind of like a skit show, like so there's no like heart or anything. But when you add a message, like the characters become real and there's a substance, and I think audience members can become more invested in the show, because not only are they having a really good time laughing about it, but they're also watching characters that they care about. And I think that's really important. And I think it works really well as a stylistic method. Like if you look at TV shows like Fleabag, which did incredibly well, you know, both I don't know, like financially and critically, and that show is so fucking funny. But you know, at the end, it just hits you with that like gut punch, and I think it wouldn't have been as upsetting if you didn't have the comedy beforehand. It's almost kind of like you have like the extremes of both, and I think the funnier something is for you to have a sad ending, to you know, to put it in layman's terms, like I think it hits it that much harder, because you've been taken on this extreme length of emotions, and you've grown to care about these characters and love them because they've made you laugh, and then to see them in pain or sadness, like it hits you that much harder. I'm not going to spoil Fleabag, so don't worry, everyone. Just watch
I've not seen it, so thank you.
Yeah,
I have to watch
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm sorry, but yeah, it's amazing. You have to watch it. A little shout out to Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Please hire me. Right, so that about concludes our podcast for this evening. Next week, the podcast will be hosted by Nate, who will be interviewing a special guest who is yet to be announced. But that's about it from me and Joe and Nathan and Kirsten. So goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.